Once again, here's Terence McKenna. Terence, how much of a loner are you there on your volcano?
Well, I'm somewhat of a hermit. I live up here with my girlfriend up a four-wheel drive road that's pretty hairy, and we try to go to town on Mondays and Fridays, and that's the lifestyle when I'm now out on the road. When I'm on the road, I feel like I'm running for president, so it's always a pleasure to get back here.
What takes you on the road?
Lecturing. That's where I make my money. That's what butters the bread.
Mm-hmm. When you lecture, what do you lecture about?
I lecture about technology, shamanism, hallucinogens, human evolution, language as a virus from outer space, syntactical aliens, epistemic balkanization, stuff like that.
Sheesh. That's a lot to lecture about. Do you generally serve up a smorgasbord when you do a lecture of all of these things, or do you do specific lectures, or both?
I do both, but usually my audiences are familiar with my material, and they come primed with questions, and it's usually pretty easy to get a self-generated discussion going based on what people there are interested in, you know.
I am very, very, very interested in time, really interested in time. And this has been one area I know that you've talked a lot about. What do you believe about the nature of time, Terence?
Well, what I believe about it that is different from what you'll hear anywhere else is I believe that probability actually fluctuates in time, that time is not an abstract idea, it's actually a medium, and that there's an ebb and flow in time on many scales of what I call novelty and habit, and that over time, novelty is in ascendancy. You could say the cosmos is a novelty-producing and conserving system of some sort. So the evolution of higher animals and human cultures and high technology is all in response to this universal appetite for complexification, which I call novelty. And except that, it leads to an observation which you and I have achieved by different means. You call it the quickening, I call it the concrescence, but I think both our notions have been drawn toward the idea that this explosion in novelty will keep accelerating. Things become more and more and more novel, faster and faster. And this is really the character of the world that we're living in, and it's destined to become ever more intense in this particular direction.
Surely it is headed toward a climax of some sort, or perhaps even a series of climaxes. If you were to be able to look down 200, 300 years, 400 years, 1,000 years, a series of climactic occurrences and changes. Or
well, I think we're mastering energy. We're mastering our genetic code, time and space. Yes, I agree. A series of climaxes, each one more awesome and unimaginable than the ones that preceded it. And this is becoming the dominant characteristic of human existence, is the anticipation and then the experiencing of these surges in the system toward ever greater self-expression of novelty.
What great examples of spikes up out of the noise in novelty would you cite in the past?
Oh, well, the Italian Renaissance, the Greek Enlightenment that gave us Plato and Aristotle and mathematical theories of nature, eras where invention, movements of people, and the birth of ideas were very concentrated. You know, there was a 40-year period in the 5th century B.C. when Lao Tzu, Mencius, Confucius, Parmenides, Ezekiel, and several other luminaries, all, if they had air tickets, could have had a dinner party together. Well, that's phenomenal.
It is phenomenal. And are we able in any way, based on what has occurred in the past with regard to these spikes, able to predict where this particular cycle is going? In other words, what's coming?
So I've come to see human history as a kind of alchemical process of bootstrapping ourselves to higher levels of I suppose you'd call spiritual existence, but through machines, through prosthesis. The machine, far from being alienating and other, is in fact basic somehow. The machines are the prosthesis of the new human. Of course, the new human is the prosthesis of the new machines. This is all going to take some getting used to.
Are we headed towards some brave new world where machines perhaps might even one day take the initiative from us and, in fact, become our masters, as many worry? The coming miniaturization of everything, the possibility of sentient computers, all the rest of it, that kind of world?
Well, I don't know if they will take control, but I think within 20 years, Art, you will encounter machines that will claim to be smarter than you are and be able to convincingly behave as though they were. And the issue, are they more intelligent than the average human being? Are they sentient entities? That'll just be left to philosophers to sort out.
Well, right now, in Europe, don't mean to interrupt, sorry, we are again demonstrating how we kill each other over religious, ethnic differences. We have always done that, and would not some machine that became at least as intelligent, if not more intelligent, and coldly logical, conclude that something has to be done about this and begin to, if it could, take steps?
Well, I read a very interesting book by a guy named Michael DeLanda, who would make an excellent guest for you. He wrote a book called War in the Age of Intelligent Machines.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want a hair-raising look into the future, this is somebody who can give it to you. There's a lot of debate among the AI, the artificial intelligence people, about what this superintelligence that seems to be emerging will be like. If it doesn't have the ethics of Buddha, the human race may be down for the count.
Precisely. Or at least controlled for the count.
Well, yes, it's very hard to imagine what superintelligence would actually look like and what it would make of us.
Well, certainly it would conclude we are acting irrationally, damaging ourselves. It would look at that coldly and logically, and then it would begin, if it could, I think, to take some steps. So,
well, maybe by thinking along these lines, we can anticipate those steps and take them ourselves in a gentler style. In other words, the first thing any superintelligence would conclude about human beings is there are too damn many of them.
That's correct. And that would be one of the first steps, Terence.
Yes, well, so are we to turn ourselves into hamburger, or shall we have a gentle program of sexual education on the subject of abstinence and restraint?
Well, do you think you would be invited to speak at the Vatican about that?
No, probably not. My Polish is pretty rusty, Art.
There are a few things that stand in the way of that reality. I suppose an intelligence might conclude, well, the wars do seem to be serving some purpose in limiting the numbers.
Well, but it's a testament to our own primitive state if we have to rely on primitive Darwinian culling of the herd to keep us vital. It indicates it's a failure of civilization. It's precisely what it is. It's a reversion to barbarism. The 20th century has been embarrassingly scarred by these episodes where very supposedly advanced civilizations with long histories have slipped into the darkness, and we need to understand what causes that, because as weapons grow more deadly and populations more restive, this is going to be a recurring problem.
And the consequences are far more final. Have I spoken with you about Matthew Alper?
I don't believe so.
Matthew wrote a book called The God Part of the Brain. And it simply concludes that man's greatest fear, long ago and certainly now, is of death. It is our greatest fear. It is the one fear our minds cannot contend with. It is the fear we cannot face, and therefore, in the process of evolution, our brains have developed a God part, what he calls a God part of the brain, which demands that we worship something and believe in an afterlife. And without that, there would be virtual anarchy, and yet that is the very thing that causes us to kill each other constantly. But even when you go down into the recesses, the wilds of Brazil, and you find a tribe that has never encountered civilization before, sure enough, inevitably you find they worship something, Terence. Interesting theory, huh?
It sounds like he's sort of working off some of the theories of Julian Jaynes. He suggested in a book about the evolution of consciousness from the bicameral mind, Jaynes suggested that as recently as the time of Homer, people had no egos. They actually, God spoke directly to them in situations of crisis and threat, and that it was only after centuries of this that this God consciousness part of the psyche was incorporated into the structures of the psyche as the human ego, and that it's actually an invention less than 3,000 years old.
Do you believe that travel in time, in any direction, actual travel in time, will be possible, or perhaps even go out on a limb and suggest that not only is it possible, but no doubt we are being visited now?
Well, I certainly believe it's possible to travel in the forward direction. I think Kurt Gödel, as early as 1949, pretty well nailed that down. The mind is, cultures create our mental confinement in time. This goes back to the psychedelic statement that psychedelics dissolve boundaries. It really, a shaman is a human mind capable of traveling in time. So I think when we understand our own consciousness, phenomena like time travel will be a part of that understanding. It will just kick out as a natural part of it. I'm sure you've probably discussed on your program these quantum teleportation experiments over the past couple of years. Well, that's way out science, but nobody expected that for 1,000 years.
Yes, a lot of people may not know, but IBM actually has done some very crude teleportation. They've actually moved. Can you describe what they did?
Yes, you're absolutely right. They moved photons in some kind of teleportation experiment. They moved them several meters at greater than the speed of light. In fact, at a travel time of 0, as far as anybody can tell. And apparently the quantum mechanical equations which allow this effect don't prohibit larger objects or even living objects. It's just a matter of scaling up the power input. Well, good Lord, if we're 5 or 10 years away from being able to teleport objects and possibly human beings, you can't even begin to imagine the sociological and political consequences of something like that.
Well, it would completely change everything we know and do. Every concept we have nearly would collapse. And it would indeed be a whole new ball game, wouldn't it?
It would be a whole new ballgame, and a concept like that has to compete with a concept like nanotechnology or digital copying of human beings or cloning, or there are half a dozen of these potential technologies out there, any one of which would remake the world beyond recognition if it were to be perfected.
Oh, Terence, I think we're already cloning. They already absolutely have the technology. Now, they claim they are not doing it, and they're doing it with sheep, and we see Dolly, and we see this, and we see that. But they have the technology now to clone human beings, and I don't for 1 second think that somebody somewhere in some lab, and I don't exclude our country from this, is cloning. What do you think?
It wouldn't surprise me at all. It would surprise me if it was happening inside the United States, because then there'd be hell to pay. But somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere in India or Indonesia
but Terence,
or China.
We've always done stuff that gives us hell to pay later.
True. The trick is to make it much later.
Yeah, usually something disclosed about 50 years later. When they don't want you to know something, they wait about 50 years. We fed plutonium.
That seems to be the half-life of hot information. Yeah.
That's right. Wait until most of those who are going to be really angry die off, right?
That's right.
That's how it works. So I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, how could we allow ourselves in the black budget world to be behind the cloning curve? I just can't imagine that. I mean,
of course, and people talk about, the perfect soldier out of
that's right.
The infantryman find the right one and then make 50,000 of that guy.
That's right. That's exactly right. So we have all these dark black military budgets, and what are they doing with them? Well, they're going to want they're not going to want to duplicate Mother Teresa. You can be sure of that. Deep underground somewhere, they're not turning out more Mother Teresas. They're trying to get the perfect killing machine.
Well, but they're going to tell you, Art, that if you clone every soldier, then when he's wounded in battle, there'll be a nice crop of organs back on ice in the clone ward for him.
Well, that's what you'd tell the perfect soldier, I guess, to keep him happy.
Well, that's what you tell the public relations officer.
So we're moving very rapidly toward all sorts of things that are going to require. Are we really up to making the proper moral decisions? Is all of this keeping up with technology?
Well, this is the great question. H.G. Wells 100 years ago, he said history is a race between education and catastrophe.
God, you're a blast to talk to. Once again, Terence Mckenna. Terence, it looks like we're okay to go here. Power's been on for almost an hour now.
Feeling confident, are you, Art?
Yeah, that's just when it gets you. I know. But what the heck, I'm going to try it. I've got a bunch of people on the line who would like to say hello to you.
Great.
It's a rare opportunity, so let's do a little bit of that. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Terence Mckenna in the wilds of Hawaii.
Hi, this is Adam from Austin. I have an experience I'd like to relay to Mr. McKenna.
Sure.
I've been experimenting with visionary substances now for several years, and recently I tried DMT for the first time in freebase form, and I, quite frankly, was mesmerized. It shook me. All I can say is it hit me in the soul. I did experience the self-transforming elf machines and
what
Terence refers to as the self-transforming elf machines.
Well, maybe somebody could help me out here, either one of you. Self-transforming elf machines, Terence, please.
Well, it's not an elf and it's not a machine, but it's rapidly changing from one to the other right in front of your eyes. Well, it's interesting to hear your story. Yes, when it works, it makes an instant believer out of you. I'm not sure a believer in what, a believer in the power of possibilities, I would think.
Oh, absolutely. And the part of the experience that hit me hardest was they were actually, I believe, attempting to translate to me your time wave zero theory. The acceleration of technology to the point of just, I'm not sure, it was...
Integration, disintegration.
Exactly.
Yes, well, there is something, the strange thing, Art, about these plant psychedelics is the sense at high doses that they want to communicate something very specific. It's not love one another. We have that message. Mm-hmm. It's some kind of very specific message about time and genetics or humanity or something.
What is time wave zero, actually?
Well, time wave zero is this set of theories that I alluded to a few minutes ago that take the position that time is this flux of novelty and habit that has been built into the genes and natural processes from the quantum mechanical get-go way back at the Big Bang, and that probability is actually a kind of blurred lens for looking at nature, and that until we understand the actual fractal nature of time, where the same patterns are repeated at many, many different scales and create an interference pattern that then accounts for what we experience as reality.
What does the zero part of it mean, Terence? Is that
the zero part of the time wave theory is that this interference pattern, which keeps pushing habit and novelty around over very long periods of time, novelty begins building up faster and faster, and eventually it reaches infinity. In other words, habit falls to zero, and you get the notion of everything happening at once, or somehow all possibilities becoming realized, that being the only logical consequence of this tendency of the universe to complexify itself faster and faster. And I don't know if you and I have ever talked about it, Art, but the most fascinating scientific discovery of last year, according to Science magazine, was this cosmological constant called omega. I'm sure Michel Kaku can talk to this, but the discovery that all of space and time is ruled by an outward expulsive force that's embedded in the space-time matrix itself. And the interesting thing about that force is, like the time wave I theorized, it accelerates through time. It's moving faster and faster. So the new cosmology, just 8 months old, holds that the universe is basically going to undergo this kind of inflationary expansion, like the quickening, like the novelty concrescence that we've been talking about. This has now emerged as the paradigmatic notion in astrophysics after being resisted for 50 years. Einstein played with the idea, called it his biggest blunder, and dumped it. But now observational astrophysics is forcing them to realize this force exists, and it is in time going to emerge as the dominant force shaping the physics of the universe.
Fascinating. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Terence Mckenna. Where are you, please?
Hi, Art. My name's Maureen. I'm calling from Redding, California.
Well, hi there.
Hi. We have some funky power struggles going on.
Well, I'll tell you.
Hi, Terence.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. I was just wondering, are you familiar with contrails at all?
With who?
Contrails?
Yeah.
That's something that we've been discussing on the show.
Right. Okay.
Oh, is it the thing about the large numbers of contrails that people think are a viral seeding or nanotech project?
Absolutely.
Well, fortunately, I only know of this because I follow the Internet. I haven't seen any contrails here. We got a photograph of a DEA helicopter where you could see the rivets on the sucker yesterday morning, but no contrails.
Well,
was that over your house, Terence?
Oh, yeah, they fly this neighborhood like crazy. They're true believers in it. But they're not supposed to come closer than 200 feet to the ground, and this guy was well under 200 feet.
Well, they make the rules.
well, for the wise men and the fools.
I'm not oblivious to the possibility that, for example, let's just draw a quick little scenario. If our government thought that we were on the verge of a biological attack of some sort, and they had what they thought was a remedy for it in terms of some sort of mass inoculation, I don't think for a second that they would not consider an inoculation without our specific permission. And what better way to do that than to add to what to most people are just harmless little contrails cutting across the sky. So that's one, possibility. There are other more sinister ones, but that's at least one that would make sense to me.
Well, do you remember those experiments that came out a few years ago where they spread powder in airports and railway stations back in the 60s, some kind of bacterial powder that they could then follow? It was some study of a possible contamination.
New York subways, Terence, San Francisco,
that's right.
Gee whiz, they did a whole bunch of that sort of stuff. So
so it would be nice to think that they're inoculating us for our own good against the evils hatched in the laboratories of Serbian fascisti. I like that scenario. Let's do the movie.
All right. First time caller line, you're on the air with Terence Mckenna. Hello.
Is this me, Art?
Only you know that for certain, but it sounds like you.
Well, thanks, Art.
Where are you?
In Indiana.
Okay, you're going to have to kind of yell at us. You're not too loud.
Oh,
yeah, I don't hear him.
Yep, see? So yell at us.
Well, I wanted to thank you for the response on the email first, Art, because I didn't expect to get one back so quick from you.
Oh, with regard to
Crystal Gale's dress. I don't know if you answered this or not.
Of course I remember, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as the question that I wanted, I think what I wanted to do was compliment this person. I've never heard him before, but he's awful good.
Yes, he is. He's very, very good, yes.
And I had a question as far as to possibly ask him if this would work over in Yugoslavia, since he is, so bright. Can I ask it?
If what would work? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I really believe we have a major problem, and
you're right.
I don't think we should look at it too lightly.
Nor do I.
So anyway, if you think this would work, I would like to know, and that is to, give the president over there, the dictator, 3 weeks to eliminate all the people in his town, Belgrade.
Belgrade, the capital?
Yeah.
Yes.
So they could all move out, like they've moved everybody from Kosovo.
Yes.
And they would have a chance to get away from that town.
And then we would do what to Belgrade?
Well, we would destroy it, like they've destroyed those villages.
I see. All
and
right.
they could.
Well, let's see.
Would that work?
Well, I don't know whether it would work or not. What do you think of that little gem of an idea, Terence?
Well, I think the word quagmire comes to mind. I also think that Belgrade may be being destroyed as we speak. I keep going over to Reuters' top stories, but I don't think anybody's going to be given 3 weeks' notice. I think it's tonight or tomorrow night, judging by the pace of things. Will it have an effect? I don't know. Dictators are extremely immune to popular pressure unless their generals come to them and lay their pistols on the table. These guys have a tendency to hang on. I think we've bitten off a hell of a lot to chew, and I'm certainly in favor of confronting fascism, but I think you need to choose your fights carefully.
Well, I also think that some of the people who make these decisions, these goodwill decisions to go and bomb until there is peace, should be required themselves to do some of the heavy lifting, but they just make the intellectual decisions and spew out the orders to those who must go and do the work.
Well, and it's a strange way of handling the problem, isn't it? I mean, we'll spend probably $500 million. A lot of peasants will be pushed around. Some people will be killed. What do we have covert operations for? What do we have special forces for?
Right.
The guy to get is Milosevic.
That's right. That's right. And I would also note that this horrid flood of refugees really did not seem to begin until our bombing did. Did you notice that?
Yeah, well, people are just trying to get out any way they can. I think ethnic cleansing in Kosovo is fait accompli at this point.
Yeah. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Terence McKenna in Hawaii. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Just fine. Just fine.
Oh, I can't believe I'm finally talking to you.
Where are you?
Actually, I'm on the West Coast. I'm in California.
On a cell phone.
Oh, on a cell phone. How did you know?
Just a guess.
Well, the question that I had was in regards to marijuana use, and I don't know if that's one of the topics that he was talking about.
Absolutely, go right ahead.
Okay, because I heard the other guy talking about DMT, and I'm not really sure about exactly what that is. What exactly is DMT? Did I miss something?
It's a good question. What is DMT?
DMT is dimethyltryptamine. It's a human neurotransmitter and an alkaloid that occurs in plants and a kick-ass hallucinogen that you smoke.
Oh, okay. So is it contained in marijuana or?
No. Marijuana is THC and various cannabinoids. But what was your thought on marijuana?
Okay. Well, Terence, the question I had about it was, I'm 25 years old, and I've experimented with marijuana since the age of 8, and well, I can't say experiment. I was
going to say you should.
More than an experiment at this point. But I stopped for several years. I did some military service and so forth, so I wasn't able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I did notice that when I stopped, I experienced some depressive anxiety kind of like side effects from not using it. I don't know if this was because of long-term effects of using it.
You're saying you went through withdrawal?
Yes. Well, I can't say withdrawal, but I think that what happened was I tried to substitute it for something else because I wasn't able to use it. So I went over to smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol, which was the substitute for it. Mm. And from that, it just seems like it was more of like trying to substitute it. And
so part of what you're saying here is that marijuana was a gateway drug for you to alcohol.
Well, something like that. It was just that it was illegal. I
understand.
What he's saying, Terence, let me interrupt. What he's saying is that when he couldn't do pot anymore, then he resorted to smoking and booze.
Exactly.
Most drugs are used by most people to relieve stress.
That's right.
If you only smoke cannabis once a month or something, it's pretty spectacular mentally. But if you smoke it every day or two, you're basically using it to handle stress, which is legitimate, of course. I mean, that's why somebody has a drink in the evening or even watches TV. I mean, TV is a drug that is used to relieve stress, although arguably long-term it may add to your stress. But habits are difficult to break, and chemical habits are the most difficult habits to break. Nature sets us up to chemically addict us to the people around us, our routines, the foods we prefer. This is something that, as I said earlier, we're not facing and talking about and educating our kids about. It's like the way the 19th century approached people's sexual fantasies and desires is sort of the way we approach our relationship to drugs. We're not really owning up to how complicated it is.
Now, can I ask a straight-out question? That's why. In other words, what is it that our government, our elected leaders, our institutions can't handle about people doing drugs?
Very simply, drugs are, for mysterious reasons, deconditioning agents, and they cause people to question cultural values. And every political system on earth is in the business of maintaining cultural boundaries. So it's an implacable opposition there that's not easily negotiated away. It's a very brave, self-confident society that can legalize all drugs, because it means that society is not afraid of looking in its closets and playing with a fair deck.
Are there examples we can point to where such a policy is in place and working well?
Well, everyone talks about the Netherlands, you know, legal prostitution, lowest AIDS rate in Europe, legal heroin, lowest heroin addiction rate in Europe, no prison building going on. Young people are using cannabis, yes. They are not using hard drugs. The connection between the soft and hard drugs seems to have been broken by legalization there. But our own drug czar completely distorted the Dutch position in public statements to the point where he later had to publicly retract what he said.
It was horrible. It was absolutely
just a
horrible.
disgrace.